Welcome to Planning Phase Syndicate. Thank you all so much for joining us for another deck tech video. I'm excited to bring this video to you, and I got a buddy joining me tonight because they actually took this deck and got top 4 in a 1K down in Florida. And I was like, hey, you know what? This is a unique enough deck. This is not something like you're seeing. This is not a Sabine deck. This is not some, crazy Kira deck. This is actually something that you have not seen a lot of. And so I thought, why not bring them on? Let's talk a little bit about the deck and kind of go through the lines of play the same way we've done with some of the other decks before. So joining me tonight is my good friend Chrispy, also a gentleman that plays X-Wing with us. So I've known Chrispy for at least 3 years now. Hung out with him last year when we went to Adepticon. And now it's fun because not only does he play X-Wing, he's also jumped into SWU. How are you doing tonight, Chrispy?
I'm doing all right. How about you, Tanner?
Good. It's like the podcast of the Chris's, right? Like that's the funny thing. And like when I don't remember if it was this year or last year, we all went out to dinner and your dad there or somebody was there and they were like they kept calling you Christopher, or maybe it was on a show. I don't remember, but they kept calling you Christopher and they're like, and I was like, I kept getting confused because I just call you Crispy. Because in my hometown, when I grew up, I had a bunch of friends named Chris, and we all called each other by like nicknames or last names because it was just easier that way. So, but
yeah,
anyway, welcome to
yeah,
the
I was
show.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure if you went to Gen Con, but that's where my dad was. I don't think he went to Adepticon. But yeah, he's like one of the very few people who still calls me Christopher. Like both my mom and my dad call me Christopher, and some of the grandparents. Although I think one of my grandfathers now is like latched onto the Crispy nickname, and he's like, man, that's so cool. I wish I had a nickname like that. So
yeah, it just makes it easier for identification, right?
Yeah,
so
easy, and it's memorable. It's not. I'm not just just another Chris. I'm Crispy. Like,
yeah,
come on.
Well, I had you on for a specific reason tonight. I wanted to do a short special episode for the team, and your deck. It's funny because originally when Fennec came out, we were like, "There's no way this is ever going to be competitive." And in fairness, this is the first time I've seen this deck actually actually somebody take this deck and do well with it. We've seen it played. I actually tried to put a deck together with similar to this, and I just didn't find the lines of play that I liked. I'm not a big aggro player either, so Lando for me fits better into this viewpoint. But I thought, hey, let's have Crispy on. Let's talk about your success with the deck, and let's actually break it down for people so they can understand if they want to take on this type of a deck, how this deck works, and what it can do for them. So I have on the screen the deck list. Why don't we go through that deck? Why don't we go through the list real quick? Tell us about the list, and some of your choices there.
Yeah. So first off, we are running Fennec Shan with Tarkin Town. The epic action red base, 25 health. Very important for a lot of matchups. But then we have 2 copies of R2D2, 2 copies of Hotshot Blaster, 2 Cartel Turncoats, 3 Green Squadron A-Wings, 3 Sabine Wren units, 2 Lethal Insurgents, 3 Bamboozles, 3 C-3POs, 3 Surprise Strikes, 3 Red 3s, 3 for a Cause, 3 Millennium Falcon, 3 Rogue Operative, 3 Fleet Lieutenant, 3 Wing Leader, only 2 Cassian Andor units, 3 K2SO, 2 Principled Outlaw, and 2 Poe Damerons.
Which is crazy. So the first question I'm going to ask is before we even get into the list is Bamboozled. You love Bamboozled? I love Bamboozled.
Yeah, it's got like there's no reason it shouldn't be a 3 of. In like a lot of these like tempo-ish hero yellow decks. It's just such a wonderful card. Being able to exhaust units is always a good thing, especially if you're aggro, being able to tap down someone else's leader. Like the one thing that Fennec struggles a lot with is leader-to-leader violence. Her being a 4/4 that flips out on 5 means that she loses to Bosk, she loses to Boba, she loses to literally any other 5 flip leader outside of Han 2. And even then, like, there's just so many different things that can defeat her. And when you lose your leader and they still have their leader, it's not great. So as long as you have a cheap way to exhaust their leader, you can make sure that Fennec swings once or twice before she goes down. and being able to play it for free as well by discarding a card. We've got quite a few yellow cards in this deck. Being able to play all your resources for the round and then also exhaust someone on top of that is really fun. And you like, there's a lot of ways where you're able to exhaust and play Bamboozle by discarding without losing your card advantage, because you've got ways to keep cards with Smuggle, and you have C3PO to help you regen some cards.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that people don't realize is what it does to the, like units that have upgrades, right? Like it just makes it so much better. Like somebody wants, like I've had it before where people play a Sabine unit and then they'll bring their Sabine leader out and I'll tap it down, let's say, with No Good to Being Dead, and they'll immediately play Darksaber on their other Sabine. And then it's like, oh man. And if I had Bamboozled, it just fixes that. In the Lando deck I run, Bamboozled is like a staple. Like it's just, this is here. Merry Christmas, type thing. So
yeah, and especially for those like Sabines and those Landos that flip out on 4, Childson can be a huge problem if you're going up against a control deck, and they can slap down like a 5/5 or a 6/6 Childson. Bamboozle just gets rid of all of his experience. He's a little 2/2 boy that you can just run through him real quick. And then it's just such a devastating card in a lot of matchups where just paying 2 for an exhaust sometimes feels middling, but there's a lot of matchups where it just blows out the game, and it just changes everything that your opponent didn't see it coming, or they just they just can't account for a free exhaust this turn. When they had a huge Boba turn lined up, where they were going to play something, flip out Boba, attack, ready all their resources, but you just exhaust Boba and their turn is way less powerful than they thought it was going to be. Cheap exhaust is good.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's really good. Let's talk a little bit about Fennec, right? So Fennec, obviously, epic action. If you control 5 or more, she gets to come out, which is really weird because I almost feel like she could be a 4 versus the 5/5. But on her unit side, when she actually does flip, basically it's just an action to ambush. So as long as she lives, you can ambush out as many units as you can afford that are 4 costs or less. So some of the examples that you gave me that were real big ones were Fleet Lieutenant, right? That's obviously a huge one. A lot of people use that in Sabine with ECL and different things to take out some sort of a Sentinel, then to be able to swing in with something else. And K2SO. Principled Outlaw is new. I've not actually played that before, so we'll talk about that in a minute. A-Wing, and then your Sabine. So let's talk a little bit about Principled Outlaw. What is the choice behind that specific card?
So really what it came down to is, once again, Fennec's glaring weakness is her body. Where a 4/4 that flips out on 5 statistically feels very bad. However, when she sticks her ability out and she stays around, like you said, there's no penalty for just actioning to ambush out anything. So she is just an entire energy conversion lab for 4 or less on herself. And we already know how powerful ECL can be. So the whole point is to get her out there and stick her out there. And the best way to make sure that there's not just a unit sitting around waiting to kill her is that you can ambush a Principled Outlaw from hand, ambush into unit, and exhaust down something bigger. For example, if a Boba flips out, you can ambush out Principled Outlaw either into Boba to do some damage into him, and then you can throw something small at him to finish him off, or you can throw Principled Outlaw into whatever their Toro is. You hit their Toro, could kill him if you got a red 3 giving you raid out there. You can kill Toro, tap down Boba. It's just a huge momentum swing. And even just playing it out on 4, and then just saying all right, the moment that your leader flips, I'm just going to attack to base with this Outlaw and tap down your leader. It forces them to deal with the Outlaw first before Fennec. And then Fennec can flip out and you can ambush any number of things.
Yeah, so it's essentially it's like a Sentinel without being Sentinel. That's
correct.
What that is.
Correct.
And you can smuggle it. You can actually smuggle.
You can smuggle
things.
Dude,
so
yeah, there's been a lot of grindy games where it's just man, I wish I had a unit out here. And it's just all right, well, there's some games where I've had where they've had to have their Luke unit sacrifice themselves into this Outlaw because they knew that they would be put in exhaust jail if they didn't keep attacking this Outlaw. Because every turn I could just claim, attack with the outlaw, and exhaust down their Luke. Being able to just exhaust things perpetually. It's a very strong reason of why this works. Is you're ambushing, you're taking out their units, and then if they try to swing into your weak units, you can exhaust them down first and have more time with those units on the board.
Yeah. I think one of the restrictions with Fennec is you had to play it from hand, so you can't smuggle out that Cassian or that Principled Outlaw and ambush it. But that's okay. I think that in the long run, that's not the end of the world. You have 37 units that you can ambush in this deck. So this is a very low to the ground flying deck. You have the ambush units or the smuggle units so that you can resource things and still be able to play them later on without having to spend all your resources. So sometimes you can play a couple of units. But like you said, the idea right behind it is to clear the board, bring Fennec out safely, get at least a turn or two with Fennec, and then turn around and say, okay, well, now I've got Poe, I've got For a Cause, I've got, other ambush that I could just start burning your deck down with.
Yeah, and even then, like, if my opponent has to spend their turn dealing with Fennec, I'm generally okay with that. Like, it's a 4/4 with a great ability, and Saboteur, which comes in handy a lot. You flip out Fennec on 5, and a lot of these hero decks that love slapping down Obi-Wan on 6, and Fennec at least gets to swing in through past him before she gets to go out, which is really nice. But that being said, like, if they're spending all their resources on the Fennec flip, using like Takedown or Forlom or Open Fire even, which, like, it sucks you can get open fired, but it's like, if you're spending your resources on Fennec, I'm just going to play a Poe on that turn, right? I flip out Fennec, you spend your 4 resources playing Takedown or Forlom, wipe her off the board, I'm just going to play Poe and force you to answer him as well. So it's just stacking threats one on top of the other. And if you try to take out something that you think is more dangerous than Fennec, and Fennec sticks around, on that 6 resource turn, ambushing K2 into ambushing Sabine can just totally take back a board state. There's just a lot of different looks. And I love the card draw specifically from 3PO to give you all those options where you can play Poe or you can ambush 2 units out real quick while Fennec's on the board. There's just a lot of different ways that you can take this, and it's just very resilient, very adaptable, and the ambush just keeps your opponent on their toes, thinking about what could I have in hand that could take out what they've got on board and how they're able to respond to that.
Yeah. Now, so I have a quick question. So, for example, and this is just a weird question, can you ambush if there's no other units on the board? Can you just spend, so like, can you play R2-D2 and ambush R2-D2 out turn 1 just so you can look at the top 2 cards? You can look at the top one and go, nope, no. I don't want it. No, you can't do that. Okay.
Yeah. Ambush specifically, and like a unit will always come out exhausted. And then it specifically says it readies and then attacks a unit. If there is no unit to attack, it cannot ready.
Okay. So that's a sad endeavor, because that would be really cool if you would be able to ambush out R2-D2 turn 1 and then just be like, yeah, hey, no, whatever. I'm gonna look at the top 2 cards and I can just start going through my deck. And it's funny because a lot of people have shied away from the R2-D2 C3PO combo. And I think in certain metas, it does make sense that you can't play that slow. But when we start moving into control metas and you're able to create a card draw, then pillage becomes less effective, right? And somebody using a spark on you turn 1, it's inconsequential because you're like, well, I have C3PO, I can draw an extra card because I have R2-D2 and C3PO on the table,
Yeah. And yeah, like another thing is that I have 20 3-cost cards. So I'm generally just calling 3 anyway, whether I have R2 or not. Like, it's not guaranteed. But like 3PO can just call 3 all the time, and that's where I'm getting some of my more important cards. That's Red 3, that's Fleet Lieutenant, that's Falcon, that's For a Cause. Like all the really, really good units that I want are in 3. And then like For a Cause as well to help burn out at the end of games is great. Like I love after the Fennec flip on like 6 resources, if I can play like K2 or a Principled Outlaw and throw a 3PO in there, that 3PO is going to regen my hand while I'm still burning them out, and that 3PO is going to go find For a Cause for me when I get them close enough.
Fair enough. Let's move on to turn 1 play. So let's talk a little bit about turn 1 play. So you essentially told me we got to have A-Wing, Sabine, or C3PO. You just explained why you want C3PO to some extent. So that makes sense. 20 cards you can pull. You have, what is that, a
40.
Yeah,
40%.
40, almost a 40%. Is it really almost 40% chance of hitting that?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, 20 out of 50. And then like you have to do math on like what you've already seen, but like blank slate, you're looking at 20 out of 50.
Yeah. So fair enough. That's actually really good, right? It also allows you to build your hand, and then if you could either go space or you could go ground, depending on which one you want. It gives you that option. So I haven't. You aren't able to ambush any of those out turn one. So even if they have a unit down, it's probably not the end of the world. It's not like you could go in and just take something out. But it does set you up for that turn two play. So is there a big reason that you don't want R2D2 on turn one?
Realistically, it's more like I like R2 on turn one if I can also play the Cartel Turncoat with it. I have 2 1-cost units in the deck. Like there are times where my opponent has played a Greedo on turn one, and then I ambush R2 into Greedo to kill him. And like that's not a bad play, but that's generally not something I can consistently like ask for. But realistically speaking, I have a lot of 2s and 3s, so being able to hold onto, like if I have an R2 in my starting hand, I can hold onto that R2 where if I'm holding on to a bunch of 3s on the 4 resource turn and I don't feel like ambushing, or like there's not a good ambush target, I can play that 3 normally, and then I have an extra R2 on the side. So having a couple of 1-cost units in there, I'm not generally, trying to play them on turn one, just because I get more value out of having either higher power out of the A-Wing and Sabine on board, or 3PO to get me the initial card draw, looking for that red 3, looking for that wing leader, that initial 3 resource play that is going to kick off the offense, essentially.
Fair enough. All right, so if we move on, we can go on to turn 2 plays. I think turn 1's pretty easy, right? Like you only got a few things you can play. We know what it is. Turn 2 becomes a little bit more enduring, where you say, hey, I want to either ambush or I want to ramp. So we have the A-Wing and the Sabine again. You can't obviously play a second Sabine if you already played one, but the probability you're going to get a second Sabine that quick is pretty low anyway. Mm-hmm. Usually you get it about halfway through the game is what it feels. So you said, I want to ambush. So if you're ambushing, is your goal just to get the fleet lieutenant, right, to be able to ambush? Is that like the ultimate like to do goal for turn 2?
So the turn 2, realistically is just trying to set up the board state, right? Like if I know that like I'm safe for now, right? Like they don't have any unit in like the ground lane or something like that, or like, for example, if I start with an A-Wing and they start with a ground unit, like any simple like 2/3 like a Pike Sentinel, just playing a fleet lieutenant, buffing the A-Wing, sending them in, like I don't need to immediately ambush into that Pike Sentinel. I can just have a fleet lieutenant swing into him normally on the next turn. But being able to push that attack, I can then just claim immediately, and then I have ambush targets out of the gate that I can use. But the real important ones are like if I play in a lane and then they try to play in that same lane, having a second unit, another 2-cost unit for that same lane to just simply ambush in and take them out is really good. I think in one of my games, I think it was against Iden over the weekend, I started with an A-Wing, and then they played an Inferno 4, and that Inferno 4 was going to be able to just attack my A-Wing unless I just threw the A-Wing at it and essentially, gave up a turn of attacking with my unit. But I had another A-Wing in my hand, so I ambushed my A-Wing from hand to kill the Inferno 4. So now my A-Wing didn't have to spend its turn attacking Inferno 4 to save itself. It could go directly to base, and now I have 2 units on board. Rather than having to, attack into Inferno 4 and then play another unit behind it. I'm still having those 2 units on board, and I've removed their unit, and I've already swung to base once.
Yeah. And I think the other idea is this deck is not super space heavy, but this deck does have a little bit more space elements to it than we've seen some of the Sabine decks. For example, Sabine does run red 3, but at the same token, in your deck, this specifically, you're not looking for a Darksaber turn. You're not looking for these. You could play red 3 and feel comfortable on turn 2 because it can buff your A-Wing. So especially if nobody's in space, I mean, what are they going to do? Right? Like just like I'm going to play this instead, and I don't have to worry about ambush, and I get to have this around for 2 turns typically.
Yeah. I mean, like I think in most matchups, red 3 is the ideal turn 2 play. Just because it changes all of my ambush math, right? like if I play a red 3 and they play a Conquered Dawn Interceptor in that lane to stop off the red 3, I can ambush an A-Wing from my hand and cleanly kill that Conquered Dawn Interceptor because it's now swinging for 4. Likewise, if they try to flip out their Sabine on 4, their Sabine leader, I can ambush a Rogue Operative from my hand, and it's normally swinging for 4, but with the red 3 rate, it swings for 5, and that is a 4 cost answer to Sabine leader that leaves a unit on the board. Like there's like the math changes in so many different ways. Ambushing a K2 for 5 kills Toro cleanly, kills a lot of these 5 health units that we see.
Boba.
Yeah, like Boba, Cassian, Sundari. Like being able to get to 5 health on my Rogue Ops, my K2s, my Principled Outlaws, even Fennec. Like I think also in that same Iden game, he played Client. And because I had red 3, Fennec could flip and kill the Client cleanly because she had the red 3 raid and Saboteur. So she could just one-shot him. So that way I could make sure that I wasn't getting those bounty heals against me. Yeah. No, I think red 3 is the most important card in the deck, to be honest. The math just changes in so many different ways that ambush becomes like those units, those 2 and 3 cost units are now able to trade with 4 and 5 cost units because they're getting that extra power. Like it's really the ideal play, unless I have like a wing leader out there. I can play a wing leader and it buffs up like a Sabine or an A-Wing, and then I can play the red 3 behind it, right? But I want that red 3 as early as I can, because that will give me many different ambush looks and many different ambush options.
So do you ever like use red 3 to like play it instead of ambushing, and even if you have to forego damage for a turn? So let's say they've got
some like it's all going to be situational. If I can ambush to kill something, I will generally try to do that. So in that instance where it's just like if there is an Inferno 4 in space and I have the option to play the A-Wing or red 3, I'll probably try to ambush the A-Wing. Because like I want to play my units, but also I want my units to stay on board longer. And if I just play red 3, that Inferno 4 is just going to swing twice and we're going to trade. But like utilizing the raid on the A-Wings and red 3 and like Sabine as well. Just if I can take a unit off the board and keep a unit on the board, that's what I want. I'll prioritize swinging to base pretty much on the Fennec flip. Because that's where I'm able to use her ability, clear out everything. Fennec can swing to base, and then from there, once I've got a clean board with like 3 units on board, I'm free to swing. But primarily, for the first couple turns, it's all about setting up, and red 3 is one of the best tools to help set up all those ambushes.
Awesome. So now we talk a little bit about turn 3 and turn 4 plays, and I kind of merged them together because I feel that there's versatility, right? Like you're saying, like, you got to understand your board state, right? So like I throw a slide together, but it doesn't really mean a lot because to some extent we have to talk a little bit about, what the board state is. If they have a bunch of Sentinel units down, or if they're playing like a heavier control deck that could just wipe your units off the board, you have to go face a lot faster, right? You have to actually become a Sabine deck without being a Sabine deck. Which is where the Fleet Lieutenant or K2SO, like K2SO is hilarious in this deck. Like when we played Fennec, when me and my son were toying around with Fennec, K2SO was a staple for the pure fact that when it goes off, right, and they have like a lower cost set, like a Pike Sentinel, you're getting that 1 damage no matter what in on their thing, because it's just ambushing in, and it's able to, like, it doesn't matter what damage it has, it just ambushes in, it just can do the overwhelm to the base, and you get your extra, whatever you need if it dies, right? You can either discard a card, or you could choose to do the 3 damage to the base. So let's talk through like turn 3. Like, do you ever wait to flip your Fennec until turn 4? Like, you have to wait till your turn 4 to flip your Fennec, but do you ever like hold your Fennec until the very end of the round? So basically you perform all your actions, you play all your cards, and then you flip Fennec and just say, okay, here you go, I can go face for 4. Or if you haven't played anything, you might get lucky and then you can throw her out there and then put a hot shot blast where you can pull that out of your resource row and attack with her.
One of the reasons why I like going swinging and ambushing into their units early is so that on the Fennec flip, I've got more actions than they do, and I can stall them out, and I can wait to see what they spend resource-wise. So if I have 2 extra units on board because, I've been ambushing well, I've been taking care of their units, and I keep my units on board, they now have to either just sit there and pass, or they have to spend their resources that would have been used trying to stop Fennec. And if they're just passing, once again, it depends. I might just flip Fennec, see what the response is. If she gets wiped out, I just play a Poe. But if it's something that I desperately need to ambush out first, I'll just spend the resources. I'll just spend the extra resource and ambush it out when I can. If it's a principled outlaw or K2 that I need to clear the grounds, that way Fennec can safely deploy. I'll do that first. But generally, I'm looking for a 3 cost ambush and a 2. Being able to flip out Fennec and then ambush a fleet lieutenant, and then play a surprise strike, or put another A-wing on the board. Once again, all contextual, but yeah, there are many times where my opponent has 5 open resources. I flip Fennec, see what happens. If she dies, I just play, I just play big units behind it. I think that happened against a Vader game this weekend where I just flip Fennec. She gets open fired, and I just play A-wing wing leader. It's just, you spent your resources stopping Fennec. All right, now you've got a wing leader at A-wing up in the sky, and you could have spent your resources trying to defend that. But because I baited it out with the Fennec, I didn't need to ambush the A-wing or the wing leader. There was nothing going on in space. I just needed you to not spend your resources trying to go up there.
So what you're trying to say is that we need safe spaces for everybody. But if you can't get a safe space, then you go ahead and you just sacrifice Fennec. That's what you're telling me. You're like, yep, I'll let her do. And I'll tell you what, it's kind of funny because I play a lot of Pelp, right? And I play a lot of control and blah, blah, blah. And I will hold, especially when I'm playing Pelp Red, I will literally hold, when I play against Sabine, a force choke, right? Just for the flip. If you want to flip your Sabine, I will literally sit here and pass. But what you're saying is, well, fine, I'm just going to flip Fennec, and if you kill her soul's life, I'm going to move on with my life. Sabine, it's a little bit more imperative when you kill Sabine off. She becomes, you can't, if you didn't ping, you're unable to ping, you aren't able to put a dark saber out. You now have to go somewhere else, whereas your deck is designed to not buff specifically Fennec. Your deck is designed to react to whatever's happening on the ground or space.
Yeah. If my opponent is just sitting on 5 open resources and just passing, I may just play red 3 and see what you do. And if you passed again, I'll probably just claim and then swing with what I've got. I'm not gonna I'll want to spend resources no matter what you do. And just establish that board state. And if she needs to come out a turn late for her own safety, if I fear that, sometimes that happens, but she is I think the worst stats leader in the game. And if I lose her, it's not that big of a deal. She goes back to ambushing units. And I'm perfectly fine for her to eat a Vader ambush, or if a Palp ramps up to it and they're playing Vader into Fennec, that's fine. I just Tarkin Town the Vader. I just traded my 4/4 for your 5/7, and I'm still gonna beat you before Palp comes out. Being able to just ambush is the most important part of her. It's not swinging for 4, but her on the board being able to ambush out these units constantly is her biggest threat. Which is why people should you should still take her out quickly, just because there's a lot that if I'm sitting on, it can really change the course of the game.
Yeah. So real quick before we move on to kind of what you're when we talk a little bit more about turn 5, 6, and beyond, we'll call it, right? Because you shouldn't be going much farther beyond 6. Do you ever flip Fennec, do your shenanigans, and then if they still have resources but haven't killed her, do you ever just claim so that way you can use the ambush the next turn to be able to just take? So let's say they throw a sentinel down, they've got 2 resources left, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to forego running into that sentinel. I'm just going to claim, and then I can ambush something in next turn to run into that sentinel, so it forces them to have to play either a second sentinel or deal with one of your other units.
Yeah, a lot of times if I'm trying to line up, I think specifically a fleet lieutenant is the kind of thing where if I can ambush a fleet lieutenant that can go kill a pike sentinel and then push a bigger unit past, that's far worth it. Because if Fennec dies that turn, I don't get that ambush at all. And even then, like Fennec is not good at leader to leader violence, but she's very good at telling her other units, "Go fight this leader for me." Like fleet lieutenant pushing itself and another unit into a Boba leader or like a Vader leader can quickly knock it out and save room for everyone else. But the ambush is incredibly important. Even times where it's just like that Fennec 4 damage isn't as important as the K2 ambush that you mentioned, where if you find a low health unit, you can ambush and overwhelm through it, and then you die, and then you also do 3 damage. So like K2 can ambush for 6 sometimes, which is like which is better, which is great. Yeah, I funny enough, I think against Ray in my top 8 match, I ambushed a K2 for 7 damage to base because it overwhelmed plus raid 1 from red 3 and then died.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about turn 5 and 6 plays here. So obviously, this is kind of how you got to close the game out, right? Like at this point, you should be getting closer to closing the game out. You are a tempo deck / aggro, right? Like if it's an aggro deck, you're definitely hitting it. But if you're running more of a tempo because you have to deal with some sort of another opposing aggro deck, obviously, the units that ready automatically, like the Falcon and the Cassians, are really good. The out of hand damage for a cause is just off the charts. That card should have been a legendary, hands down. When that card came out, that card's so good.
Very good.
And then you have the pose, right? Because the pose allow you to be able to discard cards. If you have smuggle cards, you don't give as much crap about discarding the card for Poe. So you could do that extra damage to a unit, or you could use it as a thing. The only issue with Poe is you can't ambush Poe out. Poe is the one card in your whole deck that you cannot ambush Correct. Out.
Yeah. Yeah, he's also one of the few non-rebels in the deck as well, so he doesn't get access to Fleet Lieutenant or Wing Leader, which isn't that big of a deal, because generally if I'm playing Poe and my opponent doesn't have an answer to it, I'm generally going to win the game anyway. I don't need to buff him anymore. He's the best guy to Hotshot Blaster with. Just a quick, 10 damage response if your opponent doesn't have one action to deal with him. And he's just like really good at closing out or like scaring games away. If I'm doing very well with Fennec on board early on, like that Fennec flip goes very well, and I'm just pushing all their units off with the ambush, and I Fennec flip, and there's nothing really else to ambush. Like maybe there's one unit that they put out, I'll have Fennec swing into that unit and then play Poe. So that way, like they have nothing on board to even like buff up to go deal with Poe. They have to out of hand remove him. And if they're spending all their resources on 6 trying to Rivals Fall or Felum, and I've still got units on board, well, now I'm spending 6 resources, reapplying board state. And even at the end of the game, where like you're grinding out, I'm using Smuggle to maintain cards, I'm using 3PO to get cards back, and my opponent is running out of cards, I can just play Poe and just force them to top deck something to deal with him. He I still have plenty, like you said, 37 ambush targets. I'm not worried that one unit is not able to be ambushed. But it's just like there's so many times where I can just play him and claim, and my opponent just, if they didn't have an answer immediately, it's just a game finisher. He's just really strong. I only have 2 of them, and I do resource him a lot. Funny enough, I think at the 1K I did not play him once, just because I managed to play very fast. And there were a lot of matchups where I would have wanted him and I didn't get him, or I had him in my starting hand and I just had gas for like the first couple turns where it was like, man, I have this A-Wing Wing Leader, Red 3 K2. Poe's not fitting in there. I want all that, But like, yeah, there's many games where I can just play him down and just force my opponent to single card answer him, or else it's game over.
Yeah, and he is very good at taking out other leaders too. So if you have a Boba without Boba's armor on, right? Like, I mean, that's a dead Boba right there. You can just run your Poe right into Boba before Boba can even use its, like, get 2 free resources back, you know.
Bamboozle to exhaust him down for free, play Poe.
Yeah, so that
good. Way you can do both on the same turn. It's very good.
So, all right, let's talk a little bit about strengths and weaknesses. So strengths of the deck is against it's a very versatile deck, right? You could switch between aggro and more of a tempo style deck. You have a lot of Rebel synergy. You have a lot of For a Cause hitting, so it definitely hits a lot of For a Cause. And you, to some extent, if we want to talk about it, you have a built-in ECL. You have a built-in timely for anything that's 4 or less cost. That's just a fact. It's there. You are spending 1 resource to get a timely for anything that you own. On the opposite side of the fence, though, you don't do well against Boba decks that can control your units. And ambush is not as, detrimental to them, especially because they can ambush out bigger units than you can sometimes. You also have Ray decks, which you have the healing, right? The healing is very big. It's hard to take a Ray down. And if they could get to that healing fast enough before you can, burn them down, then now we have a problem. My assumption is you also don't like stolen units, or because of the fact that you have a lot, like Traitorous probably works very well against your units. Discerning Veteran, Take Captive, those type of things probably work very well, where it kind of slows you down enough where it can stop you from being able to, you now have to ambush something else to kill that to get your unit back, and now you can't swing with it. And I will say, like, even though you do have some smuggle cards, like, it is, I think people slept on smuggle personally this set. Like, I've been playing a lot of Hondo because Hondo's my favorite character, obviously. Back when we talked back at X Wing, remember when Hondo came out in the Fire Spray? That was like the best thing in the world. Not awesome. Super great, but it was super fun to play. But like, so if you have a lot of hand destruction or mill, it can help slow your deck down too, so you're not able to ambush that stuff out.
Yeah, hand destruction is really annoying. Bazine is so annoying to deal with. Just being able to go look at my hand and go, no wing leader, no fleet lieutenant, no red 3, and just it slows me down a little bit. Having those ideal lines snatched from you. But yeah, like Boba is such a difficult deck. I mean, we all know, especially mono Boba. I mean, Cunning is just a game reset. And like funny enough, Ray Blue as well. Both of the mono decks. Vigilance being able to kill like your red 3 and then also heal back everything that you push from the first 2 turns is just very, very annoying to deal with. And then once that reset happens, you're now just turns behind and Ray is right there and you got to deal with her on like the Luke right behind it. Same thing with Boba, the exhaust bounce, or even like the bounce buff. And then you've got someone swinging into your base for 7. It can really put you on your back heel, and then you're having to, you're not just ambushing, but you're playing units. You're ambushing units to sacrifice. Like suddenly you have to ambush 2 A-Wings into a 7 Fleet Defender because that 7 Fleet Defender has been buffed twice by Cunning over 2 turns. And it's just that thing has done 14 damage to you over 2 turns, and you haven't drawn your exhaust for it yet. So you have to go sacrifice units to it. Yeah. I haven't run into too many hand destruction decks with this. I've played it against a few Han 2 blues, and generally it doesn't work out too well for them because they're like Han is, of course, damaging their own units when he plays them, which makes them easy ambush targets or Tarkin Town targets. So I can generally get ahead on board very quickly, and if they try to pillage me on 4, I'll still have cards. I'll still be able to play. And just like the amount of damage that I've pushed through over the first few turns, it doesn't matter what I'm drawing. Since my deck is so low to the ground, I'm top decking and I'm playing both those cards. Yeah. Like at 5, I draw 2 cards and I play 2 cards.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, right? If you could get your C-3PO R2-D2 out and they want to spend that many resources killing them, so's life, I guess, right? Like you've spent 3 resources, you've drawn at least 1, if not 2 cards, probably 3 by the time they kill both of them. and it's just a little slower. I personally, I don't think pillage is the way to go in the long run for things. Like, I don't run it in my red decks. I know people love it, and I will tell you it's annoying to play against, but like, you got to play around it a little bit. And I think, I think the bigger thing would be is if I could pillage and mill you aggressively really quickly, then that would be like when you be like, hold on a second, like now we got to take it seriously. But if yeah, you're right. If I spend 4 resources pillaging you and you have 2 units on the board, you're still getting 6 to 7 damage in. Period.
Yeah,
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's very difficult to pillage behind on board state. And Han generally tries to get up on board state by playing, cheating out those units essentially, like getting better value out of Cassian or K2. But we're able to ambush and take advantage of those weakened units. And even with Tarkin Town, if there's something that I don't want to sacrifice a unit to, I can just Tarkin Town something early. And then that just clears the way. Now they've got nothing on board. I've got a unit or 2, and if they're trying to pillage me, I'm just going to play more units directly after that. And even then, if I just find 1 or 2 smuggle cards in my deck, like that's enough. Like I can smuggle out a blaster, have Fennec shoot Han pretty cleanly, or just like do 6 to base if I need to.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about game plan. And we don't have to spend a lot of time. We've kind of already talked a little bit about this, right? So like if you have the Kylos of the world and the Sabines of the world, those are your aggro type things, right? Or a Boba Yellow could be an aggro. Let's not get into the depths of Boba Yellow. You already explained how that's probably a bad matchup to some extent. But you have the Sabines of the Kylos of the world. What's the game plan going against those type of decks?
So generally, you want to save those 2-cost ambush units for the second turn. So like if they play an A-Wing, your next turn move is going to ambush your A-Wing into their A-Wing. If they play a Sabine, you're going to ambush your Sabine into their Sabine. And so like, because you have that high health and low power, but you have the on attack extra damage, your units are always going to be able to trade favorably. Against like a Sabine Green, if they play a Battlefield Marine, you got Lethal Insurgent that can trade with those. And like if they play a Red 3, like, all right, you just next turn ambush your Red 3 into their Red 3. And yeah, like against Sabine and Kylo, Bamboozle is just such a killer piece. Being able to, like, if each of them get their saber, you just exhaust, bounce the saber, and then it's a clean kill on the next turn once Fennec deploys and is able to ambush something big. You can just keep them tapped down with Bamboozle, and then on the 5 resource turn, you can just right away ambush a Principled Outlaw and exhaust them again and take out another unit. The into the super aggro matchups, I generally am pretty confident. The ambush does a ton of work, and Tarkin Town as well. If they try to play something big, or like they try to ECL something big, like a Poe, to try to take back board state, it's just an easy Tarkin Town unit, Tarkin Town target. And that takes away their play for the turn, and now you got a Fennec flipped, and you're able to take back that board again.
Fair enough. How about it's mid-range deck? So now you're playing against something that's could have a similar game plan to you. You have your Boba Greens, right? We have Ray Reds. We have Han Yellows. Han Yellow is still a thing. I don't care what people say. You also have a Han Blue. That's kind of more of that mid-range tempo-ish style deck. So what's kind of the game plan against those? Do you just punt the game if it's a raid? You just go up. I'm done. Thank you.
There's lines. Time. My sideboard is just screw Ray, right? Like I'm bringing Ketsus. I'm bringing Wolf. Like we are just gonna have Ray have an awful time with those 2 units. Even like a lot of these other like cheeky units like Pirated Starfighter, being able to bounce out, kill an A-Wing or a Red 3 and then return to my hand, it just can save certain matchups where, if you're trying to play space and they're trying to play their own space units, you can just have the Pirated Starfighter essentially police the space up there and keep them out of it. Especially against like Ray Red is not as annoying as Ray Blue, because that vigilance is does a lot of work. But realistically, you are trying to play those Sabine lines. You're trying to play that A-Wing. You're trying to play that Wing Leader. You're trying to get be as efficient as possible on offense. And if you need to ambush in order to kill a restore unit, like if they play a Yoda, that's a great opportunity for you to ambush a rogue operative on the next turn. Taking care of those sentinels, take care of those restore units, and then let them swing into you. If they're going to swing into you and live, you've got Tarkin Town for that first early one, and you're going to try to push as much damage as possible. And then on the Fennec flip is where you're going to try to take over the game, where you're either ambushing a whole bunch of units and you're taking back the board state, or you're just swinging with what you got and playing Poe right behind it. And now you got Poe and Fennec on the same turn when they're probably only playing one or two. Maybe they're playing a removal in a small unit or something like that. Or like Rey is like playing removal and buffing something. Being able to get 2 units out there, 2 big units. Because even then, like Fennec with the Saboteur messes with a lot of the Rey Sentinels, and having like Saboteur is great and all. I'd rather just have the body, but hey, it's you got to usually
come on. Let's not make her. Let's not downgrade her. Like she's not broken. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Just you get a free unit. You get your free leader on that 5 resource turn. Use it to really push the momentum of the game, and then force them to take care of that unit before you can just ambush out a whole bunch of things. Like ambushing out Principled Outlaw to keep a Rey down or to keep a Han down can really push you an extra turn, and that extra turn is all you need to get them really close, and then you've got Cause or Falcon in hand.
Yeah. So then the last thing we have is control, right? So there's control, there's soft control, there's hard control. We don't run into as much hard control outside of the Bosks and some item blues. Vader blue, for whatever reason, is like, I don't know why it's disappearing. Like, to me, it seems like the set it got better. Boss blue is very good because Boss blue could deal a lot better with aggro than a Vader blue could. Because of Bosk A coming out earlier, and because of the fact that he has the whole bounty, extra ping that he can do, which is really dirty. And being able to double tap your top target is just awful. That's like a double vigilance for what cost. So dirty. But anyway, what are the lines of play when we talk about control a little bit?
Yeah. So once again, you're just like you are Sabine with different looks, right? And I've used this analogy a lot, and the more I think about it, the more I really like it. But Hondo Blue is similar to Kira Green, like this Fennec Red is similar to Blonde Sabine, where you've got the same efficient card pool, right? You've got that blue-green villain card pool. It's really good to ramp with, really good to control in the end game. But Hondo lets you use smuggle cards and lets you give different looks into different decks. And Fennec does the same thing, where at the end of the day, you've got the same efficient lines that Sabine has. You have your A-Wing, you have your Wing Leader, you have Red 3, you have K2, you have Poe. You've got everything that you need to play like Sabine, but the ambush gives you different looks to take out Sentinels or to quickly defeat restore units before rather than having to swing your unit that's on the board into their unit to stop them from restoring. You can play something from hand, and that frees up your units on board. So it's the same efficient lines as Sabine. So when in doubt, if you're going up against an Iden, just be like, would I rather be Sabine? I'd absolutely rather be Sabine. I'm just going to play like Sabine. And then you've got Fennec. You don't have to ping, but you've got a whole bunch of different ways to deal damage sneakily, right? Like you got Cassian and you got the Falcon, which both come out ready. You have For a Cause, of course, but the fun ones are ambushing K2 and Sabine from your hand and doing damage to base. So if you can get them close, even if they play out Snoke, right, and it locks down the game and you think the game is over, well, you can just ambush K2 into Snoke. You're not getting the overwhelm damage, but you died, you do 3 damage to base. And sometimes being able to just do 3 damage from hand, it's like extra causes, it's a lot of fun. And it's I'm generally not worried about that kind of control at all. We have the Valiant Assault Ship as well on the sideboard, specifically for those ramp decks. Being able to just play that on 4 and then just swing for 5 for the rest of the game, it's just something that a lot of decks can't handle with. especially with it having Saboteur. Their normal play a Black Sun Starfighter. Or if your hero ramp, like playing Bright Hope, is not going to do anything. It's just going to keep swinging by. So Valiant is very, very good in that matchup. And I also bring in Spare the Target to, bounce those Snokes, bounce those big units that would generally close out games, like a Crate or a Devastator. And just essentially just buy me an extra turn.
Yeah. So here's the sideboard Chrispy's talking about. Essentially, you have the Wolf, you have Pirate Starfighter, you have Ketsu, you have Spare the Target, and then you have the Valiant Assault Ship. The Valiant Assault Ship makes a lot of sense, actually, especially in this type of a deck because it's a Saboteur, right? So you can get through shields if they start shielding space. I will say, like, when Kira shields a space unit, you're just kind of like, this really sucks. Like, now I can't get through some of those things, like that System Patrol Craft with a shield on it. It's not super fun, but this gets through it. You don't have to worry about it, and you still usually, you're gonna still live out of that technically.
Yeah. Like the big one is 7 Fleet Defender. That kills my A-wing and kills my Red 3 on back-to-back turns. It's just 2-for-1s. So if I feel like I'm gonna be afraid in space, I will want to have either the Valiant Starfighter in here or the Pirate Starfighter as well to quickly bounce, take out the shield, and come back to my hand. But yeah, there's some matchups where it's like pretty easy 1-for-1s, and like what I gave you is generally how I go by. There are some like gut calls where I just transfer something out, where if I feel like I really need to keep space, like. And I want the Valiant Assault Ship, but I also don't want to give up Principled Outlaw. I'm fine like throwing away like Lethal or something like that. Like I want to say Lethal is probably the most easily replaceable unit in the deck. Like anything can be sided in and out for it. It's just a 3/2 with a cool ability that happens every now and then, and also happens to be yellow. It's a great card to discard with Bamboozle. But I'm super happy to trade it out for anything that I know has an immediate impact on the matchup, whether it be Wolf or Ketsu or Valiant.
Fair enough. All right. Anything else about this deck you want to talk about? We're 50 minutes in and had a good time, and maybe go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing is, I have a lot of people asking, what do I do if I don't have Poe? Right? Like this deck generally, it's got a lot of expensive cards, right? Like, you got Falcons, Red 3, K2. I'm not sure what the values of those are like now, but I remember them being pretty high. And then you have Poes, and I think that there are, I don't want to say great substitutes, but I think there are some substitutes for some of those. Red 3 is probably the most important card. I'm not sure you can run this without Red 3. I think it's that important. But for Poe, one thing that I tested a lot of is Dodonna. And I like the fact that I didn't play Poe at all at the 1K makes me want to test Dodonna again. Because Dodonna is just a great card to put down on 4 if you don't necessarily want to ambush. And it sets up your ambush like Red 3. So now your K2 ambushes as a 5/5. Your Fleet Lieutenant ambushes as a 4/4. There's a lot of different ways that changes the math. And like it just surprises a lot of people when you play that Dodonna, or even ambushing a Dodonna to kill something, and now everything that you've put out on board has +1/+1. So if you want to play this deck and you don't have Poes, absolutely play Dodonnas, and I don't think you're going to see a steep drop off in performance.
Yeah. I actually kind of agree with that, because if you think about it, right, even if you want to, like you were talking about, when you have your flip churn with Fennec, you can still play Dodonna, right? Like, I mean, and it's still like that's still a scary thing. Like that actually, like if you play that Dodonna and then you're going to flip, what are they going to do? They're going to have to kill that Dodonna. They could. Yeah. Do they really want to kill Fennec over Dodonna? Like, I mean, you've got an open fire. Which one are you going to kill? You're probably killing Dodonna, because you definitely do not want that. Just the same way with Poe. They don't want Poe on the table. So Dodonna has like, I never saw the value as much when I played the Sabine side of it, but I feel in your deck, because it benefits and enhances so much of this, and your goal is to play lower to the ground than it's a Sabine style deck was, it feels like it could fit better into this deck in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. And like, I played with Dodonna a lot, and the reason I dropped it is because I didn't have that one big, I didn't have a big guy that I could just place down and say all right, you have to answer this, because Dodonna is really good when I have board state, but if my opponent is doing well and they're trading, right, or if they're control, I play a unit, they have a way to remove it. I play a unit, they have a way to remove it. Dodonna is not as big of a threat as Poe is. Mm-hmm. And so Dodonna is way more situational, as Poe is just, I can play him and I'm going to force you to respond to him. And yeah, but even then, if you want to lean fully into the rebels, you could go for a third you could drop the cartel turncoats and you could go for a third R2 and a third Lethal insurgents. That way you're not really missing on any non-rebel units. Principled Outlaw is he's that good. You need him, and even now I'm possibly going to a 3 of. I need to do some minor changes to the deck, this deck was doing way better than I thought, and I wanted to just, because I've been playing Kylo for months and months, right? I thought that was going to be my deck for my PQ here in 2 weeks, and I just wanted to take a break. This felt familiar. This felt, but different enough where I could enjoy it, different from Kylo. And man, this deck has just outperformed everything that I put. I could have thought about it. It's blonde Sabine with different looks, and man, those looks give you such incredible flexibility into a lot of matchups that Sabine would normally struggle with.
Yeah. Well, and I agree, and I think part of the reason I wanted to do this was because I know you, so it was easy to get in contact with you, right? So it's I can message Chrispy, he'll come on. But the other reason is because we talk about these things, and a lot of people, the big issue with Unlimited is you have a set leader's play style, and I think it's because people aren't investing enough time, which is silly because there's not that much money. I don't know how much money you got out of the 1K, but the most you could have gotten was $250 if you split it 4 ways, right? That would be the most you could have gotten out of that, and you're probably not getting that full amount. And so
I got 170.
There you go. See, you didn't even get 250. So it's not that, and again, that's not bad, but that's the idea though, is right. We should be testing some of these other leaders. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to say, hey, here's something that people are going to kind of scoff at a little bit and say, well, hold on a second. This is a 4/4 leader. She's got horrible stats and ambush. And I won't lie and say that we scoffed a little bit at her when she was revealed, but you've been able to take this deck and say, hey, here we go. We've got something. I've been playing it. I'm having success. What can I do? And now this gives other people that go, hey, I don't want to play a meta deck. Here you go. Here's something that you can play that will give the same feel that you're getting, but will give you something unique to play.
Yeah, I will say it's very enjoyable watching all of these content creators, even you guys who are talking about Fennec, and it's just D tier, no discussion, D tier, and just next, move along. And it's just man, she's got so much unlocked potential outside of just that leader stat line. If we're looking at the leaders themselves, not great, but her ability just changes the game and just changes how you think of tempo, being able to just ambush anything, and with the wide variety of units that I have and all the different ways that I can ambush, who knew that you could have a 2 resource response to a phantom being played? You just ambush a cartel turncoat and kill it, right?
Yeah.
That is huge in so many matchups, and that just ruins so many decks when you have an immediate response where I can play this unit, and if you try to come fight it in its arena, I've got a waylay for you, right? And now this phantom is going to stay protected, but I can just ambush things immediately. It's a different kind of tempo that I don't think we've seen, and I'm hugging that rebel synergy as tight as I can because I know how efficient that is. So even if I'm playing something different, we understand how good these cards are and how efficient these cards are, and you can win with them. I've gone games without using Sabine, without using Fennec's ability at all. And it's just that just happens where you just have a good game. You have nothing but gas. You don't have anything good to ambush with, or you don't have any good ambush targets, and you just play a good, clean rebel aggro game, and you still win because that's what the card pool does. no, like it's been a blast. Like this is a legit contender for my PQ list now. Like real. This is done way better than I thought it was, and it's really good to talk to people about it as well. I got to shout out the KTOD and Boston Network Discords. Just talking to people on there and getting games in, and just seeing this deck evolve, and it's been a great journey, and I really am looking forward to continue playing it, potentially at the PQ, and also going into next set, because looking at the next set looks.
Yeah, this deck looks like
more.
Better.
There's more ambush targets, man. Heavy.
Yeah.
Think about ambushing heavy whenever I want to.
Yeah, be really good.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Chrispy, for joining us. This has been another Deck Tech brought to you by Plenty Face Syndicate. Thank you. You can subscribe, like, do whatever the floats your boat to our channel. It would be awesome if you helped bring us to the forefront. And again, thank you, Chrispy, so much for joining us. This is like old school X-Wing times, and we used to talk about CIS lists and stuff like that. Now we're just talking a little bit about cards. But this is a more of a CIS feel style list, in my opinion, than what we've seen in the past. So thank you for sharing your deck with us.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, we'll get the droids next set. I'm down to cook. I'm down to come back.
Yeah, we'll definitely we will let's figure out how do we get a Grievous deck that can just murder everything. That's what I want to know. I want to know, how do I make Grievous good again? And maybe we'll get an outmaneuver card that will be a little bit better than the other outmaneuver card, right? So so I don't know. That card is going to be good next set, just because if you go wide, I'm just going to exhaust the whole board. All right, screw it.
I'm down.
Yeah. Awesome. So, all right. Thank you so much. Like I said, just hit us up, like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the flippity flop.
Bye.